Hello, everyone, and welcome to this amazing panel for scaling technology in cell-based meats. And I know a lot of you have been waiting for exactly this. It's kind of a weird environment today because usually we would all be in a room together. We would have probably some nice coffee conversations before, and now we would be on stage and having a conversation all together. But really, we are everywhere on this planet, nearly everywhere. It's, let's say, US and Europe. And I'm so excited to welcome the panelists today. You will hear from everyone about their part and their role in scaling up of the cell-based technologies. And with me today are Nieves Martinez-Marshall from Novel Farms, who will be talking about scaffolding. Hi, Nieves.
Hi there.
And Professor Can Akcali from BIFTech, who will be talking about media technology. Hi, Can.
Hi, hello.
And of course, Kris Chatrathi from Black and Veatch. Hi, Kris.
Hey, hello, everyone.
And last but not least, we have James, the Chief Scientific Officer of Higher Stakes from the UK. Hello, James.
Hi.
Thanks for filling in for Benjamina.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, all of you. And thanks for all of you who are joining in for this panel. We will start this off with short presentations from each of the panelists. And afterwards, we will all talk a little bit more in detail about how we all can work together to scale up this industry. So the first person to present today will be Nieves. Nieves, when you're ready, please bring your screen up, share your screen with us. So Nieves is the co-founder and CEO of Novel Farms, located in the US in Berkeley, California. And they are an early stage company working on scalable, tunables, edible scaffolds. And Nieves will tell us all about this right now. The stage is yours, Nieves.
All right. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to introduce Novel Farms to this wonderful ag protein community. I'm going to start off by giving a little overview of what comprises the scaffolding problem. And then later on, I will introduce a little bit about Novel Farms, about us, about the journey we've started this year. So the first generation of cell-based meat products to hit the market are going to be unstructured meat products, like sausages, which are produced by culturing one type of cell, muscle cells. A steak is an example of a structured meat product, and it's comprised of 3 different types of cells: muscle, connective, and fat cells. And these 3 types of cells need to grow and differentiate together, and also form a particular 3-dimensional structure. And to build this complex structure, from the ground up, without outside of the animal, you really need to think outside of the box. You really have to do a radical rethink of biology. So let's dive into the anatomy of the muscle tissue. And here it's important to know that the structural integrity of the muscle fibers is maintained by the 3 layers of connective tissue. And this connective tissue is formed by the extracellular matrix and the cells producing this matrix. So the extracellular matrix features a variety of structural and regulatory proteins that they play a key role in muscle formation. So this image illustrates very well the intricate interactions between the structural proteins from the matrix and the proteins on the surface of the muscle cells. So these interactions are critical for cell adhesion, growth, and differentiation. So the main challenges of developing scaffolds for use in cellular agriculture is mainly being able to mimic as close as possible the extracellular matrix, the molecular composition of it. And the second challenge is to develop scaffolds that allow for co-culturing different types of cells, because the different fat cells and muscle cells require different growth conditions. And on top of that, we also have to think on how to integrate these scaffolds into the manufacturing process and really allow for perfusion of the nutrients to all the parts of the scaffold. And the most difficult part of the scaffolding challenges is to really do all these things in a very inexpensive manner, so that we can scale, the production of cell-based meat. So today I'm going to focus on biomaterials, the ones that are inexpensive, very abundant, and versatile. So basically, we have 3 types of biomaterials that can be used in cellular agriculture. The sugar base, which are comprise alginate, chitin, cellulose, etc. The protein base, which are the ones who the proteins that are in the connective tissue, and then a composite of these two, which could be like soy protein or mycelia, etc. So what I would like to highlight here is that whereas alginate and recombinant collagen has been used extensively in regenerative medicine and mostly and have performed very well, the problem with using those materials is that, for instance, alginate is sugar-based, so it needs to be functionalized. It needs to be chemically modified to really incorporate the peptides that are necessary for cell addition. And this process is very expensive. Then also collagen is a very large molecule that is very complicated to purify and it's expensive. So we are left with more like the composite materials, which are mycelia and decellularized plants and so on. And those are the ones that really allow us to create scaffolds that are inexpensive. So here is when my co-founder and I decided to tackle this problem, of the scaffolding problem. And we know how living cells work from the inside out. Together we have 30 years of combined research experience in academic labs. And with our knowledge in a broad range of disciplines, we believe we can bring a new perspective, the perspective of synthetic biologists into cellular agriculture. So we use synthetic biology. I cannot disclose much today, but it's important to know that the scaffolds can be tailored to support any type of animal cell growth, and then reduce manufacturing costs and even incorporate further nutritional benefits. So we ideated this technology this year back in March when COVID hit the US. And we incorporated in April and got selected by Big Idea Ventures Accelerator Program in May. And we, just 1 month after initiating R&D operations, we were able to obtain proof of concept. And we filed the corresponding patent this couple of weeks ago, this August. So here, I want to finish my little presentation by showing you our premature baby. The ones that's ugly, but for us, it looks beautiful. So here you can see animal muscle cells. They grow within the scaffold, attached very well. And we, using fluorescent microscopy, we were able to see that they start forming like the myofibers. So here you can see how these cells, hold on together, and here you can see only the scaffold and the muscle cells and the oil that we use for cooking. So you can see, yeah, I think. So as you can see, you know, we have the first little structure of meat. So with this, I would like to end my presentation and tell you that please join us in our mission to produce extraordinary cell-based meat products that the consumer won't be able to resist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nieves. That was an awesome presentation. And I'm sure that we will have many questions from the audience. Please feel free later on to ask these questions in the Q&A section. We will, after all panelists did their presentation, we will dive deeper into any questions that you may have. And I'm very excited to now have our next panelist join and present what they're doing. Professor Can Akcali is an expert in stem cell engineering, and with his company BeefTech, they are making the new low-cost media possible. And Can, without further ado, please bring up your slides and tell us all about what it is that you're doing.
Okay, you see the slides?
Yes,
okay.
Perfect.
All right, thank you, Patricia. Thank you for this great talk and meeting. I'd like to thank the organizers to giving me, my company, this opportunity to present our data and what we are doing in terms of, in this area of clean meat. Now we are a startup company, and we are 4 co-founders, 2 brothers, and so we are 4 people, and we are trying to understand or trying to solve the problem of how do we get this clean meat or the cultivated meat to be affordable and usage for to be for the consumers to be affordable. Now, this we all know, and many of us, some of us may not eat meat, but some of us, many of us, thinks that the meat is tasty. But we know that the meat is tasty, but it is not innocent. In terms of the price tag that is coming with the producing of 1 kilogram of meat, is the red meat. We say you need to use more than 15 tons of water. You need more than 1,700 meters square of land, and you need 150 milligrams of antibiotics for the animals not to become sick, and as well as for the animals, especially the large animals, because of their methane production, they release 300 kilogram of carbon dioxide per 1 kilogram of the meat that is produced by the conventional methods. Now, so these are the facts, but there are other facts, and the growing, because of the world population is growing all the time. And actually, you see this 7 billion 800 something population. I took it 2 hours ago. It probably, if you go to this website, it will be more than that right at this point. So it is increasing, and so there are many people that needs to be fed. So therefore, we have to find a new solution, or we have to find some kind of alternative sources to feed all those people, because the lands, the water they are not going to be increased as the population increased. Now, in terms of biology, actually meat, when we talk about the meat, it is essentially a muscle tissue. It is just what we call mesodermal tissue. It's derived from the mesodermal embryonic germ layers, and during the embryogenesis, or when the baby's embryos are growing, from just few of cells, they become a chunk of group of cells. Now, and that group of cells then we call the tissue, and the meat is this kind of muscle tissue. So what our starting point is, so if this is the case, why can't we, or why can't people replicate this process in the lab? So therefore, then the idea of cultured meat came to effect, and this is not, and it has been in 2013 from from Netherlands, Professor Post has showed actually that the muscle cells, muscle stem cells can be differentiated into muscle cells, and to find this, to form this cultured muscle tissues. So it is, the cultured meat is real actually. It is produced in the lab environment. It is not difficult. So if you, Mark Post didn't get any Nobel Prize because it is not difficult to do this kind of process. And it is healthy. It is free from GMOs. It's free from diseases. It's free from contamination of the conventional meat production. And you don't need to put lots of antibiotics for the animals. And especially the most, maybe for some of us, the most important thing is it doesn't require any slaughterhouses that is very terrible to watch or to see those, what's happening in these slaughterhouses. So this environment or cultivated meat is an option to potentially reduce the environmental cost, as I'm going to explain, and it increases the health benefits for humans and protect the welfare of the animals. So in this, let's see this in this cartoon, what we do is, or what the people are doing is actually can take a biopsy from an animal's calf, and then small biopsy, this is the muscle tissue, you can you can isolate the stem cells, muscle stem cells, and out of these muscle stem cells, you can proliferate myocytes to become a muscle tissue. So it is not a $1 million question, but it is very easy to do it. You can't even get a master's degree if you do this in a graduate program. But the thing is, if you want to do this for the consumers, to become a commercially available, there are some problems. The problem is the cost. And when Mark Post has announced the first cultivated burger, it was $330,000 per kilo in 2013. Now it's not that expensive, but it is still expensive. It's like close to $3,000 per kilo. The reason for this is actually the one that has been used for the growth of those cells, which we call fetal bovine serum. Fetal bovine serum is full of growth factors and all the essential nutrients that are required for the muscle cells to grow and differentiate. So you can't do it without any fetal bovine serum. But unfortunately, it is very expensive, and you need for fetal bovine serum, you have to kill both the mother and the embryo and suck all the embryo's blood and get the serum. And you need huge volumes that are required for this production. So without fetal bovine serum, you wouldn't be able to proliferate those cells. And almost these $3,000 per kilo, 90% of the overall cost is due to this high cost of FPS. So this is where we are interfering to this area, is a Biftec Co. And in this, what we are trying to solve this problem is to lower the cost of this problem, is to bring up some solutions. So we don't need to use the fetal bovine serum, but as a whole, but we need to use the growth factors that are required for the growth of only muscle cells. Remember, this is for the embryo. For fetal bovine serum is required for the full growth of embryo. We don't need the skin, we don't need the bone, we don't need anything, brain, anything. We just need the muscle cells. So we just need the muscle tissue. So we don't need the whole set of systems that are growth factors that are present in the fetal bovine serum. And our solution is what we have come up with, the Biftec Growth Medium Supplement. This is what we have found and isolated from plants and or microorganisms. So these are natural products, animal-free. We don't use animals. We don't do any kind of genetic modifications to this. So therefore, it's genetically modified or free, GMO-free. So this is what we are using in our experiments or in our systems instead of FPS. So what we have found so far, without using FPS, we got very similar results. Without using FPS, we got very similar results. Very little fraction of the cost of the cost of the FPS. So we are thinking that it is like the cost will decrease, but maybe 50 or 60-fold, so it will be affordable. Now, there are some companies in this area which are working on it. Some of them are working on this genetically engineered systems. Some of them are animal-based. But what we, as I told you before, what we use is these are microorganism, plant-based solution, and we mimic or we trick the cells and we emulate the living body conditions in the lab environment. So we think that this is the best solution for this. Now, the other thing is actually animal welfare we are talking about. So in this, as I showed you in the previous slides, and we made Erdem, who is also another scientist in our company, he made a calculations. So Turkey has 80 million people, population is more than 80 million people. And according to this kind of biopsy, 1 or 2 cow would be enough to produce all meat that is required for to feed all the people in Turkey for the protein production. So therefore, we don't need to kill the animals to do just taking biopsies, and we will be able to generate meat that is for the consumables for the people to eat and consume the proteins and the meat. So we, as Nieves mentioned, we are also one of the participants of the Big Ideas Ventures startup program, and we are hoping to join other people to join us to make the culture meat affordable and consumers will be able to eat. So one last sentence that I'm going to say is actually, now the subject of this this talk is scaling. So you can't scale up things if you can't make it affordable. So if you lower the price, you can scale up. But if you can't lower the price, you can't scale up. So this is what we are trying to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Can. That is a very strong statement at the end, and I think you just prepared and set the stage perfectly for our next speaker. Kris Chatrathi from Black & Veatch, we're so happy to have you. We are delighted to hear someone speaking about all the scale-up process in bioprocessing, where, as I understand it, you have 30 years of experience. Am I allowed to say that? So I'm super excited to hear you speak about your experience. You're a lead process engineer at Black & Veatch, and you have built different plants in bioprocessing all over the world, as I understand it. So please, Kris, share your experience with us, and I'm excited what we are going to hear from you.
Well, thank you, Patricia. Well, first of all, glad to be on the panel. I have a few slides that I want to introduce, but let me give an introduction to myself and Black & Veatch. Black & Veatch is an engineering company. We do things all over the world, and we do things in many industries. But one of the things that I'm really proud of is we work with innovative technology companies, and we like starting with when they're initial companies and then growing with them. And one of my favorite examples is how we work with Tesla. We started helping Tesla with their initial supercharging stations, and now as Tesla has grown, we help build supercharger networks. So in the area that I'm in bioprocessing, and so I've worked with biopharmaceutical companies as well as biofuel companies, and also in between, food ingredients as well as biochemicals. And just to kind of talk about the scaling side of things, we work with everything from pilot plants all the way up to fully commercial scale plants. And I'm going to share just a few slides with you. And please let me know if you can see this. Patricia, can you see this?
Not yet, Kris. Now we can see it. Thank you.
Okay. So
you may want to go in presentation mode, Kris.
Okay.
We could still see the other slides.
Is that better?
Now we see the speaker's view. Do you have a second screen that you're using that you want to share?
Okay. I do have a second screen. Let me. You know what? Let me just go ahead and talk about it instead of worrying about the technical aspects. So, in brief, what I'm interested in, what we do is we think about science to engineering to commercialization. So, the idea behind this is that there's a format or there's a approach where we use technology readiness levels. So in terms of technology readiness levels, 1, 2, and 3, we essentially a company would be in the lab scale and defining their initial technology. So by the time they get into a level 3, they've done lab scale, repeatable, qualitative and quantitative verification of their concept. And then, so essentially that is the science aspects of it. And but then eventually, or the next step really is to think about the engineering aspects. How do we engineer a pilot plant, and how do we gather additional data so that we can envision a fully scaled commercial plant? So technology readiness levels 4, 5, and 6 are, you can think of them as pilot scale plants where additional engineering is done, the additional data is gathered. And in that stage, you're also looking at the economics of the production of, in this case, say, cell cultured meat. And the previous speakers have talked about, well, how can we get something that's ready for market? And part of the thing is, what is the price of the final product? So the way we manufacture it can be optimized in technology readiness levels 4, 5, and 6. And typically you do that in a pilot plant and do experiments to increase yields or decrease operating costs. And then finally, we, in the final different stages, 7, 8, 9, you can build demonstration scale plants that are producing enough product so that you can introduce it into the market, get validation of the quality and acceptability of the product. And typically at the end, you have this final commercial scale plant that is fully ready for production. And then in addition, all along this phase, you're working with investors to show them the scientific, the technical, or the engineering evidence on the viability, both the scientific viability as well as the market viability of the idea. And just as a kind of an idea of what these different levels mean physically, in the early stages, you may be making cell cultures at the 1 liter level, for example. And that's typically in the lab, and then as you go into the pilot plant, we're talking about cell culture bioreactors in the 10, 100, 1,000 liters. And when you're transitioning to commercial, we're talking about 10,000, 100,000, maybe even 1 million liters. So the idea that how do you get from the laboratory to a commercial scale facility that's actually producing enough meat for millions of people? That's what we think about. That's what our company thinks about. And what we do is we typically work with companies that are in the laboratory to help them build pilot plants. And then, once we've gotten some experiments done in the pilot plants, then we help them build commercial plants. And all along the line, we're working with our partners, we're collaborating with them to show investors how much money is required to kind of go up these scales, go up these development pathways to final commercialization. So I want to just kind of say, at Black & Veatch, we like collaborating with companies. We like long-term relationships because there's a time period associated with all of this activity. It takes multiple years to go from kind of lab scale to commercial scale. And depending on how many iterative experiments you do, how many pilot plants that you have to build, we're here to kind of work with people to shorten that time frame from getting from lab to fully commercial. So some of the examples that of bioprocesses that I'm currently working on, there's some cell culture companies that we're in the clean meat area that we're working on, both for, let's call it land-based animals as well as sea-based animals. Probably one of the examples that I can share with you because it's in the public space is we work with a company that makes single-cell protein as a feed ingredient for aquaculture. And that particular plant has a bioreactor, if you will. It's a proprietary bioreactor that's 300,000 liters. It's a full-scale commercial plant that is basically within months of getting ready to be constructed. So, sorry I couldn't share my slides with you effectively, but if you get in contact with me or if you pass on your information, we'll be glad to get you a copy of the slides and a more full presentation. Patricia, that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Kris. And we will make sure to get these slides out to everyone. So Sorry for that little glitch. That's just, I'm sure everybody of you has been in Zoom meetings enough to know that these things just happen, and we certainly appreciate your patience. But I mean, this was really an amazing overview of what Black & Veatch is doing, and I think we will dive into that deeper also later on to see how can all collaborate to make cultivated meat viable, and that's exactly what this panel will discuss later. So I'm very excited to have our last speaker now up to present themselves and to present their company, and we're putting it all together with James Clark, the CSO of Higher Stakes, and they are a vertically integrated company, and recently, as I'm sure you're all aware, put out a piece of bacon that looked just awesome and like the real thing, and we'll discuss about the scalability of this in a little bit. But James, please tell us about what you're up to at Higher Stakes and give us the big picture.
Sure. Thank you so much, Patricia. Just to say, I'm a last minute addition to the program. My CEO, Benjamin Abolag, has been detained with something else, so it's quite urgent. So pleased to be here, pleased to be part of this very exciting panel. I just want to start that, I'm relatively new to Higher Stakes, so I'm the Chief Scientific Officer. And, for me, I've seen over the years the need to have a more sustainable agriculture. The population's growing. We need to have something that actually has reduced carbon dioxide. There's also the massive issue with antibiotic resistance. So, to have something suitable is so critical. And just to add, and I'll talk to this as well, is that a number of the panelists have talked about cost effectiveness. If you're going to scale something, you've got to make sure that it is going to be cost effective as well. You've got to have the price point of your final product to be, within the reach of the consumers. And, and that's one thing that we're working hard in Higher Stakes to actually do. So just to go back to Higher Stakes just now are focusing on porcine, on pork. We use induced pluripotent stem cells to actually produce the meat. And as Patricia says, we've recently shown a number of prototypes, and I actually tasted them as well. And I think this video was online, and I was pleasantly surprised at the quality of the actual the prototypes. We did a prototype bacon, and we've also done a prototype pork belly. And so, yeah, I mean, as a company, we've came a long way in 2.5 years. So where are we going now? The company is UK based. We are currently planning and actually starting to think about scaling up, because again, scaling up has its own issues. I mean, my background is quite varied, from pharma and from biotech, and I've been involved in certain aspects of scaling up over the years. And scaling up in any process is not easy. If you look at pharma, there's a lot of lessons that the cultured meat market can learn from pharma, and with regards to bioreactors and scaling and technology and control. But there's a lot of specificities as well to the cultured meat markets, and we do have to adapt and actually make sure that everything fits our needs. The one thing that Higher Stakes are doing just now, we're looking at bioreactors, we're looking at the process to actually help scale that into pilot plant. And that's so critical. And there's so many different factors you need to actually take into account with regards to that. And so we're still at the early stages, but again, planning and actually moving forward with that. So Higher Stakes, again, is moving fast. We're hopefully within the next 3 years going to be commercial. That's the plan. And within that time frame of 3 years to pilot plant and collaboration. I think from my perspective in the field, I think we have to draw upon the expertise that's out there, such as Black & Veatch and others, to actually help move the whole field forward. So I'm pleased to be part of this community, and looking forward to the further discussion.
Thank you so much, James. That was a really, really good overview about what is actually needed and what your plan is. So very excited to hear that. 3 years. Huh, I can't wait to taste that. Is that UK or?
Yeah, well, I mean, that is the plan. In about 3 years, we plan to have the scaling done and actually to have to move forward reasonably quickly. I mean, the one great thing about our processes is that we talked about being cost effective. I mean, we're working hard to bring down the cost of the media, to work with other parties and to make that happen. Because again, the key thing is you can scale, but it's got to be scale with regards to costs, as Kris said. You've got to make sure that everything you do is cost effective and make sure that planning is meticulous to make sure you get to that end product, which is a delicious piece of cultured meat.
Thank you, James. Yes, that is a great answer. So thank you all for introducing what you do to our audience. And we're now going to the second part where we will be hearing all of your opinions to different topics that I'm sure are burning. Please, if you have any questions in the audience, put them in the Q&A box and we will go through them. And I'm looking forward to answer all these questions with our panelists. Just a brief intro also about myself. My name is Patricia Bubner. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Orbillion Bio. And we are focusing on providing cell lines to the cultivated meat industry. So we're another very important piece of the puzzle to really scale this whole industry up. And feel free to reach out about that more to myself. But now I really want to dive in with all of our panelists. And the first question that I have, I mean, there were a lot of amazing hooks that you already had in your presentations, but really I would like to have a brief statement from all of you. What do you think is the major issue in scalability? And let's start with you, Chan. I think I know the answer, but take it away.
Yeah, you know the answer, the cost. So if you lower the cost, I mean, it has been brought up with other panelists also. If you lower the cost, it will be scaling up. So it's like, we are now in the comfort of our home or office, and we are talking about with the cost of very little cost of whatever the internet is, but it cannot be possible 20 years ago. And this is, if you lower the cost, it's a different analogy, but if you lower the cost, it's going to be, you can scale up.
Excellent. Thank you, Chan. Kris, what do you think is the major hurdle to scaling up?
For me, that's an easy one. I would say it's establishing cell viability, cell yields, but at the hundreds of thousands of liters and maybe millions of liters scale. So I think our industry, the cell culture, clean meat cell culture industry, I think we're still in the 110, 100, maybe 1,000 liters, but I think we need to be in the hundreds of thousands of liters of bioreactor size.
Thanks, Kris. Nieves, what are your thoughts on that, especially pertaining to scaffolds, of course, where you're an expert in? If you think about hundreds of thousands of liters, how will that work with scaffolding?
Yes, well, the first thing that I want to highlight again is that, as I said in the beginning of my talk, we're the next generation of cell-based meats, right? Like, so we are thinking of producing whole cuts of meat. So in that sense, we haven't gotten there into the integration into the manufacturing process. However, I would like to emphasize once again that the cost of the biomaterials need to be really, really low. And that's why we need to find in nature, and I believe that's the best approach, in nature, a system that will enable us to really tailor the scaffolds to the different, needs of the cells. So I would say, yeah, in scaffolding, choosing a biomaterial that is edible, affordable, very abundant, and customizable. That's like the key message that I want to convey.
Thanks, Nieves. And we'll talk about the cost factor in a little bit. James, when you hear that as a company that probably will be, you know, a client of one or more of the speakers, how do you think about it? Where is the thing that you want to cut cost most right now?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's for us, it's obvious. It's really the media costs, and for one, you know, it's sort of they're really bringing down those costs and making everything completely animal free, getting rid of FBS. I think is so critical. And one additional comment just to add, I agree with Kris. That top end scalability, you know, it's still to be reached. One important thing that, you know, a lot of companies are looking at, and us as well, is recycling of media to make sure that, you know, the media is used effectively. So I think, yeah, that there's sort of a mix of issues, but yeah, we are keeping a close watch and, you know, sort of, you know, working with others in the field to actually make this happen.
Thanks, that's a good point. Media cost, can we dig into this a little bit? When we talk about media cost, are we talking about water? Are we talking about sugar? Are we talking about the salts in there? Or are we talking about something else entirely, Can?
Okay, of course, all the ingredients that you are talking about have some costs, but some of them have more cost than the others. And the FBS, with the growth factors, cost much more than the normal other kind of nutrients that these cells are required. I agree with Nieves when she told that you need to lower the cost of the scaffolds and all the things. That's right, but you still need these media components in these scaffolds also to grow those cells. Of course, these are, but you know, the bioreactor cost. So if the price of the bioreactors, large bioreactors, is not, you know, it's expensive. But the point is, you got a bioreactor and you use it. Maybe if you take good care of it, you use it for some more years. So you can make lots of it out of this one bioreactor function. But the FBS or the media, this is consumable. So you have to change it. And you have to, I agree with the panelists that when he said, you know, you have to recycle whatever the things that you are using. This is very important point. So we are, Bifteko, we are also planning on doing some experiments on this. So, but this is something that you use once and you pay and then it's gone. It's not like the bioreactor stays there for the next available production. So I think,
yeah, Can, thanks. That's an amazing point, and I think that's something that I would like to hear Kris's thoughts on. Mm-hmm. How do you think about media recycling, media cost, and the bioreactor cost that comes with it?
Yeah, so you know, I think there's two things that we got to think about. You know, the cell densities that we're able to produce in any particular volume is something that will help us decrease the volume of the bioreactor that we would need. So maybe the commercially viable size is 50,000 liters and not 300,000 liters. But that would only be true if we can get cell densities up. Now, then you have to think about what is the media strategy that you would use to get to higher cell densities. And my mind goes to, you know, perfusion and a media strategy which limits any inhibitory metabolites that are being produced and also takes expensive components like growth factors that are limited to the exponential growth of the cells, you know. But to go back to Chan's earlier point, you know, the whole point of feeding another billion people, you know, when we start thinking about that, we do need to think about media recycling and things like that, and decreasing the costs. You know, I have higher confidence that we can decrease the amount of water usage and stuff like that. But I suppose I would like to see a media strategy which only feeds the bioreactor just the right amount of media components that are necessary for the growth of cells as the cell densities grow within the bioreactor. That's a lot there,
Kris,
but I hope that makes sense.
No, totally. Just a question, is water really the problem, cost-wise?
Well, you would be, you know, in the large commercial scale plants that we've seen, utility costs do make a difference. You know, I think water usage, electricity usage, we also struggle with like cooling water. So the energy usage and water usage, there is a cost associated with that. The media components are definitely one of the costs that is a factor. But I'll give you a rough idea when I think about when we're doing large scale commercial plants. We worry about the capital expenses, that is the initial cost of putting that commercial plant. But then our clients typically also worry about the operating costs, which is where we worry about kind of the media components. But typically, it's always has been in the utility usage, the electricity and water usage and wastewater that you're generating.
I think that's a great point, and actually something that I haven't heard before. That makes me think about what location would be good for a plant, because that sounds like California would be an awful location for that plant. But let me get to that in a second, because regarding driving the cost down for media, just to take a step back here, there's something that I actually wanted to ask to Nieves, because when we think about increasing the cell density, as you said, Kris, which will be hugely important to drive down cost and use media more efficiently, I think scaffolding can play a huge role, right, Nieves?
Yes, actually, something that no one has mentioned yet is that in the proliferation phase, in the bioreactors, you need microcarriers. And those are beads that function as scaffolding first, right? Because cells need to attach to something. If not, they undergo self-death, right? So microcarriers, and with the biomaterials we're working on, we are now looking into mimicking these microcarriers. And for a bioreactor of 2,000 liters, the cost of the microcarriers is can reach up to $16,000. So by using biomaterials that can be used in this phase, that are much more affordable, then we can contribute to reducing the cost. And in addition to that, another aspect that we're looking into, and my co-founder and I, is that as I show you in the extracellular matrix diagram where all the molecules were there, so growth factors get like embedded within the structural proteins and presented to the cells, right? So if we are able to have a scaffold that can be functionalized with growth factors, and then really measure what's the concentration that we can have locally, we will be able to have the growth factors in the scaffolds, and in that way, we will reduce the cost of the media needed for that.
Awesome, Nieves. That's a great point. And, you know, excellent to hear from an expert such as yourself who really knows what it takes to grow these cells. So thinking about what we just mentioned before regarding location, right? And operating costs and growth factor costs and media costs, do any of you have thoughts around how can we scale efficiently around the globe, and what would be good locations for these plants? And that's actually a question that was submitted from the audience. So I don't know if you, Kris, want to go first on this one.
Yeah, sure. You know, if I were to take a look at in the U.S., for example, I would imagine a lot of these plants are going to have to be built. There's two aspects to the location. One is near a large metropolitan area, but also near one of the largest substrates that you're going to, so we see large scale, I'm going to call them bioprocessing plants that use glucose as one of the primary substrates being built next to, glucose manufacturing plants. So for example, in the Midwest in the United States, high fructose corn syrup is made out of corn, and that sugar is used to feed the bioreactor, feed the microorganisms, or feed the cells. So because you need a lot of that, sometimes people co-locate those plants next to, adjacent to plants like that. Similarly, you can do it where other sugar manufacturers are in different parts of the world. Definitely Asia, there's different opportunities with sugarcane sugar and stuff. So in any case, the locations that have a high cost of water and a high cost of waste disposal are probably lower on the list. You had mentioned California. I mean, I think you can always build a pilot plant there, but you'll have to go to a more agricultural areas to build these type of plants.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Kris. Nieves, do you have any thoughts on location-wise? Where would you see that work out? And would it make a difference for what you are doing? Like the scaffolding that you produce, is that location dependent in any way?
I wouldn't say so. I don't think it affects the scaffolding. On top of my head, I cannot come up with anything. But regarding location, I think the goal of cellular agriculture is to be able to have, the manufacturing, close to the end consumer. So to reduce, the cost of transporting, like from, like having the meat, like the factory farming and the slaughterhouses, and then transport the meat and all those things. So ideally, it would be good to have the plants close to urban centers and like to minimize those, to transport, for instance.
Very good point. Thank you. Moving on to a different topic. If we think about, all these different expertises that we have here and all these different innovative companies that come up, whether it's established companies such as Black & Veatch and other players in the field, or all the new startups. And there seems to be a need for all of us to collaborate, as James has pointed out before also. How do you think that we can most efficiently collaborate in this space as companies? And I think I would like to call Can first on his ideas on how that will work from the viewpoint of a media company.
Okay, I think as company, we think that in this area of cultivated meat, not every company should do the same thing. So if another company is doing something that is close to what we are doing, we have to benefit from this. So it will be mutually beneficiary for us and for their company. So I think it is especially very, very important to do the collaborations where it's going to be the cultural media, scaffolding, and the other things. So it's extremely important. One thing that I am going to just say 1 second for the previous questions is actually we have to be, we have to take this into consideration. Now, we are, even though we are thinking this is a good idea to go to cultivated, but we are far from getting it to for the consumables, for the consumers. So I think Kris says that, the product of the cost of the water and the other things, of course, but the conventional meat industry uses all these electricity, all the water and everything. So this is not something that it's going to be built up from out of nowhere. So it is, this conventional meat industry has been using this kind of energy and the cost and for the year. So if you are going to arrange this talk maybe 10 years from now, it will be logical to discuss what is going to happen in the next couple years. But now I think we are in the process of whether this is doable or not, and whether this is consumer friendly or not. Of course, there are some costs. It will be less later. It will not cost like this time of the year. But I think for your questions, the collaboration is very important, and it will, like all academic works, I don't need to know everything. So if somebody knows better than me, why not? I should collaborate.
Thank you, Can. That's a very good point. And James, I would like to hear your take on it, since you are putting all of that together and you are vertically integrated, but how would you want to collaborate with other players in the field?
Sure. No, I mentioned this earlier, and from my previous experience in biotech, I think especially new and emerging fields, it's always beneficial to all the players to collaborate. One area that we haven't really touched on, yet is regulatory, and I think it's like all of the players in the cultured meat field would be a benefit to work together to help define the suitable pathways, for example, in the US and in Europe, and to actually sort of speak with one voice. Because again, it's rather than disparate, because I mean, higher stakes are small, Memphis are much, much larger. But again, we all have a common goal. And I think it's a benefit to actually sort of work together, especially in regulatory as an example, to actually move things forward. And as well as my other panelists mentioned, with media and other aspects as well. I mean, there's certain things that, of course, that all of us want to patent and keep secret, but there's many things that are of benefit to the whole community and will help make the whole community even more viable. So, I mean, I personally have always believed in collaboration. And and I've
that's a great statement.
Yeah,
James, and I completely agree.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's actually, I have to say, what at Billion Bio, we want to create a standardized platform so we can, for example, approach regulatory from a common way and all work together. And that's what actually also was a question from the audience. How will we address regulatory also compared to other industries, and thinking of biopharma industry, biotech industry, and maybe cultivated meat will be a little bit closer to biopharma in that sense. Kris, I would actually like to hear your take on that, because I think you must have a lot of experience with different regulatory processes.
Yeah, so I think we have to be careful. First of all, in terms of collaborating, I strongly encourage everybody to look at the Good Food Institute. They are thinking about some of these things that we're thinking about. But let me, in terms of the regulatory atmosphere, what I see is definitely biopharmaceutical is the strictest, and even in pharmaceuticals, there is kind of a difference between injectable pharmaceuticals versus oral solid dosage pharmaceuticals, and then definitely there's also a difference between animal health and human health. But if we get away from the biopharmaceutical regulatory framework, then there is another framework associated with foods. So what we find is there is well-established engineering principles associated with foods. The dairy industry, the others have established bioprocesses and how to build those bioprocesses, how to validate the microbial control that you need, the refrigeration temperatures, or the, I'm going to call it sterilization temperatures, but there is a framework out there for food that we can use for human consumption. And Now, I think we can't ignore the fact that some people are looking at feed ingredients. So some of these cell culture or other things could potentially be an ingredient into the final product. So there's that
That's a
aspect
great
to it.
point, actually, Chris. And thanks for bringing it up. I think that the important point was also distinction between, you know, is it edible or is it something that we inject into people? We definitely don't want to inject clean meat into people, I think. And also, of course, the potential to use it as a feed ingredient. I know Nieves has definitely something to say about the regulatory aspect as well, because that's going to be important for scaffolding, right?
Yes, well, I wanted to bring up that, you know, scaffolding is also used in pharma for drug screening, for instance. For drug screening, you know, you need hydrogels that replicate the extracellular matrix. So we were thinking, what if we could also tap that market and, you know, like increase, you know, our reach with these biomaterials? But yeah, as someone mentioned earlier, the pharma regulations, the FDA, you need to, they're very different. It's very different from food regulations. So you really need to focus on one because yeah, it's a different world, right? And then another thing that I would like to bring up is genetic engineering. For instance, one thing important for scaling up is being able to get much more mass of cells, of tissue, right? So one way to do it is by genetically modifying the cell lines and, you know, make them immortalize them, basically, which is, I believe, like what Higher Stakes does. So that will bring down the cost a lot and allow for scaling. However, then we have to deal with, okay, the FDA and the USDA approving cell-based meats, and on top of that, approving GMO. I mean, genetically modified.
You are touching on a very soft spot here, Nieves. That I think we could have an entire panel on that discussion. Will we do GMO or not? And I agree, it's a super important topic. And actually, I would love to hear what James thinks about that, since you pointed out higher stakes.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, higher stakes, we are avoiding a GMO completely. We are GMO free in everything we do. Our attitude is that this helps us with the regulatory. If you look at GMO organisms and getting approval, having that actually, well, at least from my perspective, it makes it more difficult and takes a longer time to actually get regulatory approval. So at higher stakes, we are going down the GMO-free route.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think I heard.
And sorry, Nieves, I know that John has something to say to that as well, because how is Beeftech seeing that?
You know, I think I don't, you know, to tell you the truth, I don't see GMO as black and white. So it is like, if there is no GMO, you wouldn't be able to eat, let's say, orange in the middle of summer, for example. So there has to be some kind of, you know, it's not like every GMO organism cause cancer or something like that. So we are living in the middle of this pandemic, and now we are talking about this GMO. So it's kind of irony at this point. But I think, but when you say there is a GMO, I think for the regulatory purposes, it is going to be a problem. Not for me, because I think GMO, as I said, there is a different tone, like 50 shades of gray. So it is like, you know, there is a different
totally.
tone of gray.
And sorry, John, it's just, I think that's a great aspect. And I couldn't agree more with you. We need to talk about the regulatory acceptance, but also, and that was a question from the audience, how do we think about consumer acceptance, right? At Herbalium Bio, for example, we say we provide the farm to table story, where we really say we know where the cell lines come from, and we can or cannot engineer them depending on what the consumer wants. So I would like to hear your take on that, James, a little bit.
Sure. Well, at higher stakes, like you know, we're vertically organized, and the one thing we're planning just now is that, you know, again, there's many activities that we're keeping in-house. And actually the end product is so important. And the one thing for me, if you look at the field, there's no regulatory approved product just yet. I think the whole field wants to make sure, from my perspective, that the product, when it's released, will be tasty, it'll be great, and actually, you know, will be, you know, as good as farmed meat. So, so from our perspective, it's so important. We've already done prototypes and actually have went down that road. But again, moving forward, it's going to be so important for us and others to work with food scientists, to work with the public, to increase acceptance. Because again, you know, there's studies out there that have said, well, you know, some people are willing to try, some people just won't. So again, you know, it's going to be a process.
Totally,
process.
James.
Yeah.
And I love what you've been doing with that. And I think that really was showcased in the products that you were putting out there. I encourage everyone to look up these articles and the beautiful pictures of higher stakes products. And I know Nieves has a very special twist on that consumer acceptance as well, right?
Yes, it's our goal to kind of promote, increase consumer acceptance by developing the scaffolds to the point where we can recreate really premium gourmet meats. And that's the reason why, in addition to collaborate with other companies to develop scaffolds, we will showcase the technology to the point to reach, to be able to produce jamón ibérico, which is a Spanish delicacy from my home country. And with that—
I can't wait to try that, Nieves. That's going to be awesome. I just want to hear Chris's take on how do you think we can scale up something like a jamón ibérico or a bacon?
Wow. You know, I want to introduce another concept. There's scale up in terms of increasing by orders of magnitude, but then there's also kind of a scale out. You know, there may be a approach that we need to think about in trying to understand what is especially for structured products. I think we'll have to think about scale out in the sense that maybe growing a structured product in a 50-liter or 100-liter bag is appropriate. And then we can think in terms of manufacturing technologies that have, say, 1,000 of these 100-liter bags and a system that feeds all of them the appropriate nutrients to grow. And the final product is actually in that bag, and you know, we store the final product in that bag. So I do encourage people to think in terms of scale out as a opportunity to get to the final customer. So
so what I hear is we're not there yet. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think Chan's idea of feeding the next billion people is still far away. I think we're still not even at the
stage of feeding another million people. And I do suspect or at reaching price parity with regular meat, right?
Yeah,
that's a big problem. And I know, Can, since Kris also mentioned you, how do you really think about that? I mean, let's be honest here. When will we reach price parity with structured products, and how can media help us to get there? And then let that be our last wrap up comment, because we have to leave, unfortunately. I could stay on forever with these people, but it's a wrap. Can, how do you think about that? Media and scale up and structured products and reaching price parity.
Okay, so this is, as I told you before, it's not going to be happening in couple or maybe 5 or 10 years. It's going to be, it will take some time. So as I told you before, as a scientist, like there are different aspects of clean meat or the cultivated meat. I'm only focusing on how to generate these cells without the use of FPS. There are regulatory concerns, other kind of concerns, religious concerns, and these are some other people's job. So this is what I'm trying to do, is actually trying to come up with a solution to lower the cost. But what I'm not sure what's when is good. I'm not saying anything about, as Kris says, 1 billion people. I'm going to feed 1 million people. But like 50 years ago or 60 years ago, nobody was believing this air conditioning. Now, without air conditioning, I mean, you can't survive. Now, if you look 60 years ago, with the air conditioning, they will say, oh, are you insane? No problem.
John, that's a great comparison, because here in California, I tell you, yeah, you couldn't survive without air conditioning. We ran a little bit over time. Thanks for everyone who stuck with us. This was an amazing discussion. I really appreciate all of your comments on this. And what I hear is that we need more collaboration to drive the cost down and to be able to maybe feed the next 10,000 people in the next couple of years. Let's stay tuned, but appreciate all of your support. Thanks to all the panelists, and thanks to everyone who tuned in today.